Thank you very much for coming to the very last session of the Video Engineering Summit, the inaugural year. Jan Ozer and I co-chaired all of these sessions. Jan is up here. I think I'll just quickly say it's been great to see these sessions so well attended. The WebRTC session, any of the sessions I've seen in this track seem to be of popular interest. And if you have any ideas or you want to be a speaker potentially for the next go around at Stream Media East or next year's Stream Media West, please do submit your proposals. We have to solicit a lot of content when we want certain gaps to be filled. We go out to our networks to find people. So, and that doesn't always work. So please do submit content ideas if you have something you want to present on. And here we are. We're at the last session. My name is Robert Reinhardt. I worked with this wonderful group of people and the group that they've assembled to, it was actually one of the first one-to-many low latency services I had to build from scratch with this team, and I got to go through some learning curves with them as well as the kind of technology stacks that I typically use in my day-to-day work. As most of you may know if you've seen my previous sessions, I do a lot of Wowza development, and that was my initial foray with this group that's about to go into their presentation with me. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome Orkan up and let him talk a little bit about what we've been building.
Okay. Hey, everyone. Thank you for having me out here. Robert's been kind enough to invite us. Even though looking at you guys, I can tell you guys are way smarter than I am, so I'm not going to get into the technical aspect of it. That's why I got these guys up here. But a little bit of background about us first. So Plondo Network, our parent company, which we founded here in 2009, we are a direct response advertising firm. Nothing technical, nothing streaming. We started with shared mail, direct response advertising, postcards, door knockers, and so on. So we grew our business, quite quickly, became the second largest DirecTV retailer in the nation. And I don't know how you guys heard yesterday Slingworks, so we were a retailer for Dish. For many years. And the way it really works is we do the advertising, the calls come to our call center, we make the sale, we sell the contract to Dish Network, and they pay us a bounty for it. So that's how we started our business. And over the years we grew. We're one of the largest ADT dealers now, and a few others. Allstate Car Insurance, if you search Allstate online, you're probably going to call one of our ads. So over the years, we said, we're in the business of making money, right? We don't care what it is, as long as it's legal, morally right, and if we can have fun with it. So a few years ago, we developed the concept of That's Right. Now, it was a little ahead of our time. We had fun. And you guys are wondering what's That's Right. It's a game show app. It's a game show happening to be delivered on your app. That's it. So last year, we were at CES, and somebody said, hey, didn't you have That's Right? I said, yeah. Have you seen HQ Trivia? Have you guys heard of HQ Trivia? So we said, okay, you got to be kidding me, right? So, and these guys are pioneers. They've really done a good job, heck of a job. Now, if you look at our register, That's Right has been registered 6 years now. So it's not, we didn't go after HQ Trivia, despite that they grew much quicker than we did, obviously, and had a little bit more money to back up. But, so we decided, you know what, let's have fun. When I was raised, I remember as a kid, I was raised in Germany. Saturday nights at home, we watch video games. What better fun way to get the family around and play some video games together? Not video games, I'm sorry, game shows. And we did that. So it's always been a goal of mine. So now we start, okay, we can do this. Even though we're in the marketing business, we don't know anything about streaming. We're very tech savvy in our way of generating leads. So I called Miguel. I said, hey, Miguel, we'll come in the office. Let's do this. So that's what we did. We didn't know where to start. It had a lot of challenges, and it's been a very expensive endeavor. So currently, we launched a few months ago. We gave away a little over $200,000. We got a show every other day. Started off with one show, and we have a second show already developed. Have not released it yet. We are 100% self-funded, so we have been blessed that our parent company, a core business, has been doing well. So we can have some fun on the side and waste a lot of money with this project. So again, for you guys, you're in the industry, you're tech savvy, tech smart. It's, to me, who's not in the tech industry, who's not that technical, it seemed pretty simple. Why can't you just get this and this done? And, woo, there's a live stream, real easy. I can FaceTime. Why can't we do it in this kind of level? So it's been challenging, and it's been very expensive. So that's one thing we underestimated. Initially, the budget we put up for this project, just to start off to get the launch, was $250,000. So we including the prize money we gave away, we're a little over $1 million invested in this project. And we're good. So hopefully it will take off. I'm going to get Miguel up here in a second, and he can talk about your language, right, the technical part of it. But it's been a learning curve. It's been a blessing. And it took us a little longer than we thought, and it was a little more expensive. But so, Miguel.
Thank you. How you guys doing? Good? How many engineers do we have in here? Bunch. Wow.
We are hiring, so if anybody's not happy, we're looking for all kind of engineers. No joke.
Wow. So I'm also non-technical, just like Orkan is. So just a quick story. As a teenager, I came from small island in the Atlantic Ocean from Spain, right? They gave me a tennis scholarship to come here. I said, shoot, that's a great opportunity, right? They're going to pay you to play tennis. Come here, exciting, right? Only problem is that I didn't speak a word of English whatsoever. For 2 months, didn't understand my teammates, my teachers in class, the coach. I just saw him doing signals like this, and nothing else. I couldn't even ask for food at the cafeteria, right? So that was a real challenge, very overwhelming. Now, fast forward about 24 years, and when I get out of the meeting with Orkan, I kind of felt the same way. Because I said, look, we got to create this. It's got to be the best live game show up that there's going to be out there. Get it done in 6 weeks. I said, wow, I have no idea about streaming. I mean, nothing at all. So my mission basically was analyze what we have in-house and decide what kind of talent do we need, right? And I had to learn the language. I had to learn your language. I had to start looking at, there were only a few other games going on. Robert had been involved with one. There was HQ going on. So we kind of studied the way they were doing it. And basically, we had to go out there and find people. So we had 4 people in-house who could actually code front end and back end. So they were in charge of developing the app. But we had nobody who knew anything about streaming. So we had to evaluate vendors. Actually, I flew to Atlanta to meet with people from Tolix. I don't know if you know them, Dr. George and Dr. Nino, great company. So I was evaluating several vendors, and I came across Robert, right? We had an interview, and we immediately clicked. And we had a, I guess, quirky sense of humor. We like coffee, too. So we clicked, and I thought, man, this is the person we need. Knowledgeable, strategically minded. He had been involved with a trivia game, and he was an all-star of the magazine, right? Streaming Media Magazine in 2013. Right, been a while. So I said, well, we got to get him on board. He ain't cheap, but you get what you pay for, right? So he brought along AWS expert who will help us scale as we went. So that's how we started. I mean, one thing we realized in this industry is that not everybody knows everything, even though we're just learning. As we were evaluating vendors, they kept saying different things. So one would say, no, you got to go with WebRTC. No, the way to go is HLS. No, stick to RTMP. You were asking me about HQ, and they were a mix from what we know between RTMP and RTSP, right? RTMP, I need to look at him. So nobody knew exactly how to implement the solution, and that's why we need to find somebody to work with, somebody you could really trust. And that's why we went with Robert. He's going to go into all the details. I'm only going to do a few minutes. Now, streaming was only part of the puzzle. I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but I mean, we had to go and create a studio. We had nothing. I mean, we had no encoders, we have no lights, we have no teleprompters, we have nothing. So we were auditioning for hosts. We were interviewing with ad agencies trying to sell the concept. We were hiring a music composer in Spain to create music, 3D animation guy. I mean, we thought right at the beginning that creating a game show app wouldn't be this complex, but there were a lot of moving pieces. So at one point, we got about 20 people working in the project. So, and that was a lot. That was a lot of people because we only had 4 in-house, so we had about 16 contractors, excuse me, working on the app. So for us, the most important thing, like I said, is relying on the expertise of the contractors and establishing a good relationship with them. And can you play that video? And speaking of trust, this is how we felt. I don't know if you've seen this exercise, the trust exercise, right? Everybody has done this one?
Building trust
between
one another. So Harrison, if you don't mind going first, step up here on this chair and close your eyes. All right, and then everybody fill in. And we're going to ask you to fall, and then they will catch you. So you have to trust us. So I'm going to count to 3. Just relax and fall. Okay? 1, 2, 3. No, wait, no!
So that's our group of experts right there. That's Robert in the back. So yeah, trust the experts. Anyway, we finally decided to launch, right, beta test. After a few weeks, we could do the beta test, but we only did internally. Then we got a few dozens users, few hundred users. Now we're getting all excited. We're going to get a few thousand users. What happens is that when you start giving money away, you get some cheaters entering into the picture. Not only are you giving away money, but you have to keep them at bay because they're trying to game the system, which is not fair to the other people who are trying to play just a regular game and have fun, right? So, I mean, we're starting to get some bugs in the code, the app crashing a few times. So now in the middle of all this, we decide to launch the Android app. We decide to do it in-house also, to code it, also in a few weeks. So we just keep going, keep pushing. And at one point, we surpassed 10,000 simultaneous users, which doesn't sound a lot compared to HQ, but for us, it was a lot, and we kept growing, right? But as soon as we got the Android version out, we started getting some more bugs in the code. We started getting problems with some of the elements of the app not populating at the same time as the streaming. And the problem is the app is live. The show is live. You can't just pre-record it and then take care of the problems. You're having people there who are getting mad because the app crashes. They go immediately into social media. It's panic. Sometimes we have to pause the show, cancel the show on the spot, and then start tweaking the app, forcing people to do updates. So we got to a period that it became really frustrating because there were too many moving parts. Everybody was getting frustrated. He was getting frustrated. Our families were mad because we're working nights, weekends. Users were getting mad. One of the developers quit, right? Couldn't take the pressure. So we decided to take a break, regroup for 3 weeks.
It's not like that anymore. It's a very relaxed environment. We got foosball tables, ping pong tables, you name it. Free lunch.
So we finally regrouped, and just last week, we relaunched, and things seem to be going a lot smoother now. Now, it's a trade-off. It's a several trade-offs that we've seen. One is you start getting feedback from analyzing the data and getting ideas about how to tweak the app. So you keep making changes. At the same time, you want to keep a stable version for a semi-long period of time. So that's a trade-off. Another trade-off you have to consider is how much patience do the users have? How many chances do you get? Because like the keynote speaker said at the beginning, right now the users of the app, they're not patient at all. I mean, there's so many options out there. If you're playing and the app crashes, that's it. There are no second chances. We're lucky enough that we're giving away free money, So they give us a little bit more leeway. It's like, oh, you give us $5,000, you come back tomorrow, okay, we'll give you a second chance. But we know that there are other players coming into the market. It's becoming a really hot industry or segment. So everybody wants to come into the live game shows. And we know we have to tread very carefully and run things smoothly. And now that the app is more stable, now we have to focus on bringing more users and create the mass that we want. We have a plan to reach 100,000 users by the end of next year. That's our plan. Because at the end of the day, I don't care how ultra low latency you get and how cool the encoder is and all this stuff that we have to play around. If you don't get the users, we won't survive. I mean, the money is not going to be just pouring forever, right? So it's time for us to grow, and that's where we see ourselves. So Robert's going to talk about all the technical stuff. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Miguel, for that was pretty elaborate. I didn't expect him to go in so many of the details, but I'm glad he did, because it was a pretty good illustration of what the day-to-day life of that dev team was like. And I'm lucky. I'm living on an island. I just have to observe it from a very far distance when I'm working on the stuff that they have me working on. I wanted to just quickly run, well, not quickly, I'm going to basically, what we have left today, I'm going to walk through the streaming architecture. I'm going to do a little demo with Wirecast to emulate what we would do in the early stages of development, and take questions, of course. I also wanted to just mention, there is a quiz tonight, right?
Yeah.
Tonight, and so like 3 hours, if you want to try out the game, not that, just so you can see how the video looks and, from purely a technical point of view, it's tonight at 6:15, I think,
6:15 local time.
our time. And one of the things that I can somewhat pick and choose the projects that I work on, and I was really excited to work with these guys because they had a different idea. And the thing that I really like about their game, just as an aside, is that you can still win money if you don't make it to the very end. So every question you get right, you get tickets to a raffle at the very end. And I kid you not, these guys rent it. You rented it or did you buy it? That raffle?
We ended up buying it. We had a custom lottery machine built for us.
Yeah, they have a lotto machine. It's blowing the balls around and everything, and so it pops up and then if your number is picked, then you win the whole prize of that. So like if there's $2,000 up for grabs, 1,000 gets divided among the winners of the quiz, and 1,000 goes to whoever wins the raffle at the end. So even if you only get 2 questions right or you space out, you get a chance at winning this large prize. The other thing I thought was interesting was reasonable ad integration that they did. The way, and I'm glad you told me more about your background there, because I knew you did marketing stuff, but I didn't quite know the level of it, where it started. So the fact that he's already established relationships with sponsors on the show, what goes like, right now if you load up the app, there's an ADT security sponsor logo there. And if I go and sign up, I get how many tickets do I get if I sign up?
You get 5 tickets when you sign up.
You get how many tickets?
5 tickets.
5, yeah. So if you
sign up with ADT.
Oh, with ADT, 1,000. So
yeah,
obviously.
So if I bought, if I sign up for the $19.95 a month ADT plan, I get 5,000 raffle tickets for that raffle. So, that's clearly going to skew me to, potentially win that money. So I just thought those were interesting incentives, because a lot of the trivia games I don't think are going there with the sponsors that they have, and I think that's largely because they're not self-funded like you, right? From the get-go, you wanted to try and establish a very viable business model, which really
part of our goal was that most of these companies, even if you look at the OTT companies, all they do is keep raising money because they're not self-sustainable. So when we built our app, we wanted to make sure we have a model up there for the advertisers to a vehicle to drive their traffic to them. So we tried different, obviously with direct response advertising, we tried ADT as well. We had Domino's Pizza on there. We have an agreement with Walmart in place. So it switches back and forth. But we wanted to make sure from the beginning when we built it, if somebody sees it there, an executive at Walmart, Office Depot is another one, can see, hey, okay, this is how we can advertise, this is how we can monetize it, this is how they're doing it, compared to all the other guys. I mean, again, they keep raising money, they raise money, and I've never been in that kind of business. I'm not smart enough to do that. So if it doesn't sustain itself, for me, it's not a viable business model.
And there you go, straight from the CEO's mouth. As many of you know, I do a lot of Wowza development. I don't work for Wowza, and I actually evaluated other ingests for this too. We played around a little bit with Nginx as an origin and an edge. Now that Nginx is a open source community edition versus a pro edition, there's not as many bells and whistles, or when it comes to an edge server running Nginx, I wasn't confident anytime I stress tested it, and I had to sort of play around with variables in terms of threads it was running on, and I felt iffy about it. I'm not saying it's not possible, but in the end, I decided not to use Nginx as the complete architecture here. There are licensing costs, of course, with Wowza Streaming Engine, especially as you start to grow your own network. Remember, we can't use any CDNs for this type of operation, at least not the way that we've architected it. In the future, as we start to see some of the developments that they talked about with next generation HLS and CMAF, where you could get below 2-second thresholds, we might be able to look at some things there. So without further ado, I'm just gonna quickly go into the developer or development publisher setup. So all we did was, while they were building, like they said, they had to build everything from scratch. It's not like they came to me with a studio and everything ready to go. They had to buy lots of components, and some components came along with other setups that they had. We used Wirecast. I use Wirecast a lot in my own webcasting, usually to augment the hardware side of things. And you're probably going to laugh, I used a Flash, since I came from a Flash developer background, I know how good an RTMP stream can be in terms of low latency. I mean, in terms of just how much you can dial it in. And for me, when I'm dealing with iOS devs and Android devs that my clients are bringing to the table, one of the things I'm helping educate people's developers with are the video side of things, because you could be a really great app developer, but if you've never touched video, it's all Greek, right? Just like with any other kind of front-end development. So even though I'm not an iOS developer, I've gotten, as time goes on, I'm getting to know some of these SDKs better. And so I can at least evaluate them against a known good quantity, like a Flash player that I built years ago, right? So I'm gonna just go into that real quick I don't know why this thing takes so long to end the show. It's PowerPoint, what can I say? Keynote's a little bit faster. But here's Wirecast, and I talked about some of these challenges in my other session today about real-time streaming. And so you can see right now I've got a reference video. It's just some Getty stock. Can we take the lights down just a little bit? It's a little washed out. I don't need to be fully broadcast, and there we go. That's good. That's a little bit better. It's just a low-key setup here. That's great. So I've got Wirecast running. This is the latest version of Wirecast, and I've got one of their little widgets added as a clock, just so that I've got the local time presented, so I can use this as a reference point. Now, I'm going over the hotel Wi-Fi, which, and I'm getting I better unload Skype, sorry. That was during the break. Let's quit some of these messenger apps. You don't need to be hassled with that. So one of the devs on their end in Louisiana, Joseph is his name, he and I would often do these kind of tests, and I would control his desktop or whatever to make sure Wirecast was set up correctly, and we would start this kind of broadcast. And this is all RTMP, and I'll just show you quickly here that we're actually using some options here that the TriCaster that they ended up getting doesn't have, because the TriCaster edition that they have right now is using FMLE under the hood, which is pretty old tech, right? And as far as H.264 goes, it's an average encoder, right? So I'm able to use X.264 with Wirecast. They've had it around for a while now. And just to show you, if I go, into edit, I don't want to choose a new one. If I edit the preset, I showed this in my earlier session too. I'm using a tune zero latency X.264 command option. So again, there's a very fast preset being used here. One of the decisions you have to make, and when I've worked with other folks in the live streaming, in the live quiz space, they always want to do these HD resolutions, and they're going to be, the higher the bit rate, the more likely you're going to be prone to latency issues, right? Just because you're pushing that much more data out, and you're making people consume it that much, so if they're, and the weakest link with these mobile games, because they're on phones, is the network, right? I mean, even a good Wi-Fi network is gonna have lapses, 3G, 4G, so the biggest problem I have with stakeholders, because they're all used to high quality, is getting their setup so that they have something that can compress pretty well. I've had folks come to me saying, yeah, we want to do these crazy animations behind the host while they're talking, and you can try to do that, but it's just like any compression 101 that you'd learn from Jan or me or anyone else that is walking you through compression basics. The more you have changing in your scene, the more everything's going to suffer, right? So if I'm a host and I'm animated and there's like sparkling dots going all over around me, then something's going to suffer, especially at lower bit rates, right? So solid backgrounds that don't change. They're using a green screen setup. Most of the folks that are doing this kind of stuff are using green screen. So minimize that movement, right? It's sort of the difference between a talking head video and a sports clip, right? There's just more movement, more bit rate. So in this scenario, it's basically a rotated 16:9 aspect ratio, right? That's the other thing that's interesting, is that when you're pushing to a phone, it's not your traditional broadcast. Like I've heard of folks that are actually sending a landscape picture to this, and they're cropping in the app. I'm like, why? Those are wasted bits. Why are you doing that? Like, it's just nutty. We never did anything like that, and that's just hearsay that I've heard from some other folks. But anyway, and so I knew right away, and that's one of the bad things about hardware encoders. Not all hardware encoders are designed for these specialty cases. Hardware encoders are used to going out to broadcast and 16:9 display. You start trying to do crops that are rotated. I mean, they're not rotating cameras. Mind you, they'd be shooting with a camera just like this, but in the TriCaster, we're creating a canvas that's cropped and outputting that. So, and even at the, I'll talk about that on the next slide. In the production environment with TriCaster and FMLE, there's 2 bit rates. I think they've recently added a third too. So that's sort of the encoding backend as far as Wirecast, but again, they're not using Wirecast for the final deployment. We could explore as further optimizations that TriCaster they have has an SDI out, so we could take the program out into something else that is running an X264 encoder. We could probably upgrade the TriCaster license at some exorbitant cost to use a better encoder. Not that I want to pick on TriCaster, but it's sort of good compression shouldn't cost you that much money these days. So anyway, that's sort of the background on the compression. I'm going to go ahead and just stream this and see what happens here. It looks like it's pretty good so far. I don't see any alarm bells going off. It's keeping it around 800K. And I'm just going to go over to my browser here and bring up the, I must have closed it. I don't see it in my Windows. I want to leave that one up. So I use this reference client for any type of, there it is. So again, since I was a Flash developer in the days of yore, it wasn't hard for me to sort of get this Flash Swift back and working. So again, this is just for testing purposes to make sure that this is to test the edge origin latency, right? So right now, and I'm just going to sort of cheat and go ahead here in PowerPoint. I'm going to come back to this. It's streaming now and playing. Oh, come on, PowerPoint, really? So this was step one, but just know that we're going to a Wowza origin. There's any number of edges that are repeating back to live, or grabbing the stream from the origin and repeating it out to anything that's connected to it. So I'm going to come back to that slide, but that's sort of that same pipeline is what I'm doing now. I'm wirecasting to an origin that we have set up in Virginia. That origin is repeating to, there's just one edge live right now because he spun it up. I'll talk more about what they're doing to sort of handle the scale better. But if I come back here to Safari, we'll see that there's some numbers up here for debugging. I've set the buffer at 0, which was something that was nice that you could do with Flash. So with Flash and H.264, I could set a super low buffer in terms of what the player bits need to be. Sometimes you had to set it to a tenth of a second. And you can see, I can even just lining these up right now, you can see these numbers are drifting at about 2 seconds apart from each other. And my mileage is I've tried this out a few times today, and again, of course, this is not ideal. Their studio setup has dedicated connections coming into the studio, so they've got really fast throughput out. I don't think to date have had any kind of, have you had any broadcast issues? Like, have you ever had a problem with the internet coming out of the studio today? No. So no issues like that have ever come up, and we could, you know, as they start to grow the offering, let me just try and get this to be what I want it to be, which is them right next to each other. And it seems to be getting a little closer here. So just comparing my seconds offset here, and you know, I'll just do sort of quasi-scientific results here. Like I just did a quick screen grab to see where it's at, and you know, based on that, it's like, it's probably it's between a second and 2 seconds in terms of latency. And again, that's going through the edge. I'm round tripping all on this Wi-Fi network. I'm not even I don't even know if I have a LAN connection here, but I didn't plug in the LAN, right? So that's all over Wi-Fi, which is less than ideal. Obviously, if I'm watching on a mobile device, people are watching over some kind of wireless technology. So it's not a bad idea for testing purposes to be on a similar network condition. But it's one of those things where when it comes, and I'll go back to my slide deck. I'll go ahead and stop pushing here so I don't need to waste the bandwidth. What time do we go till? 4 or 4:15? 4. Till 4. Okay, so I want to make sure we have time for questions. So I'll go back to the slide deck here. I don't know why PowerPoint takes so long to get itself going there. So I'll go, the production publish, I already mentioned most of this stuff, but a mini HD4 SDI, we're using a portrait orientation at 916, not 16:9, and at least 2 software encodes, one that's at 800, and again, that's just with FMLE, which is sort of comes with that mini HD under the hood. It's using FMLE. So 30 frames a second on both renditions, and goes down to 400. And this is where I think, I can't remember if we have a bandwidth detector in there yet. Maybe that can come up later. But one of the things, of course, that I got used to from day one when I started building video solutions, like when I lived here in LA and I worked for Schematic back in the early 2000s, one of the first big projects I worked on was Disney's, or rather ABC's full episode streaming player. And that was all VP6 flash back then. But you know, if you didn't have 800 kilobits back then, you just couldn't watch the show, right? Like you would get a message on the ABC site saying, sorry, your bandwidth isn't good enough to play this game. And I think at a certain point, that's the biggest problem with any kind of real-time live broadcast where there's a brand and identity at stake is like, you know, just because someone comes with 100 kilobits doesn't mean that you should give them a stream, right? Maybe an audio stream would work. That's, again, a stakeholder technical conversation. Like, well, what are you willing to sacrifice in order to reach connections that are severely compromised or could become severely compromised? I've worked on all sorts of real-time applications over the years, celebrity chats, celebrity psychic chats, and you know, and things that were going to be positioned to be celebrity chats that never saw the light of day. And the biggest problem was that the stakeholders and product owners had is like, well, you know, this has to work anywhere. And it's just like, it doesn't even work anywhere in Star Trek 200 years in the future. I mean, you know, atmospheric disturbance, they can't even use the transporter, right? So, I mean, this problem of not having enough bandwidth isn't going to go away. And when you have something that's popular like a game like this, I mean, you want to make sure that it works for the people that have, you know, that meet the prerequisites. So I think that that's something as game offerings evolve, not only can they offer lower bit rates, at a certain point you just don't want to go any lower because it's going to fall apart. You just got to make sure that people are properly screened before they come into the app, and just let them know, like, hey, sorry, it's just like if there's a dress code to get into a fancy bar or something, you know, it's just like, sorry, man, we're not going to let you in here. You you don't jive with the rest of us. Anyway, I shouldn't make it sound like it's an exclusive club. The bandwidth club, you know, you got to be in the bandwidth club to play. Anyway, so the first gen network that I spec'd out, and this is before I brought the cloud dev in. I actually do try to be mindful to my clients' budgets, even though Miguel was poking fun at my expensive rates. I didn't immediately ramp up resources that I have on my end. So I have a cloud dev that I bring in to architect bigger solutions so I can focus on the things that I want to focus on. But I know AWS architecture more than well enough to get, especially for a few hundred users. When we first started out, I knew we weren't going to scale to thousands overnight. And the smart clients that are trying to get into this space do exactly what they've done. Keep your numbers low at the beginning. Don't, make sure, again, if you're going to run into issues with the app and, you don't want to, try and just go big or go home without, thoroughly going through the paces of that. Some of a past client that they were referring to that shall remain nameless, like they started all their testing in Canada and just, I guess they and now that I live in Canada for a lot of my work time, and personal time, it's sort of funny, like, oh, Canadians, yeah, they don't matter. They're not gonna like spread word. Like they're nice people. They're not gonna break out to social media and give us some bad rap. No, but having a good sized test audience that lets you kick the tires on the technology that you're trying out. So in this situation, we pretty much would just spin up and down these edge servers manually and just use Route 53 load round robin DNS. So, it's pretty easy to do that. You just need to make sure your IPs are assigned to weighted records on Route 53. And what happens is that every device that wants to watch this stream is connected directly to one of those edges, right? There's a one-to-one relationship. Nothing really goes through Route 53 except the DNS lookup. So I can have a universal domain like live.that'sright.com, and when the DNS record is pulled down, it'll do a latency to see which one is the closest or most responsive, and it'll weight it too so that if there's 3 clients, each of them should roughly be spread apart across that load. And it generally works. Like I've been amazed. You send 1,000 connections. There might be 510 on one and 490 on the other, but it's pretty balanced. It's not like a direct one-to-one, but it works really well. And plus, it was something very low footprint. Didn't take a whole lot of time for dev setup to do, and away we went. So we did that for probably the first month or two. I mean, I'm trying to think, like it was some matter of time in testing before we went to stage 2, and that's when we just brought in a network load balancer. And again, since all the traffic is in North America, largely in the US, it's not a big deal to, we didn't have to go to multiple AWS regions. In fact, my cloud architect, who actually works for a big mobile advertising company, that's most of his time is spent with that group, but I'm lucky to have his cycles to do more advanced work on my end. He's just like, it's even for super big operations that he's had to do with scale, they will often just use one region's resources, because creating a multi-region scalable scalable resources is often a lot more work than you need to. At a certain point, when you're doing HQ size loads, you will need to spread that load across multiple regions. But when you're talking of connections in the tens of thousands, it's easy enough to do this all with just 1 or 2 load balancers on AWS. In this case, it's a network load balancer, just forwarding port 1935. Again, I talked earlier in another session about, I like RTMP because of its simplicity. It doesn't solve all problems, but we've got the latency that we wanted, and more importantly, it's an easy, I was joking about it during my real-time session. When it comes to WebRTC and WebRTC protocols, firewalls, I think, will start to evolve so that WebRTC traffic can go through it. It's funny, when Dr. Alex was up here before, he was talking about Facebook and all the big guys are using WebRTC, and they've been using it for a long time. But there are instances where Messenger won't work behind firewalls, right, if they're using WebRTC specifically, because there's a lot of ports to open up there and negotiate when you're working on those RTP or RTSP types of connections. RTMP is very straightforward, and we've already gone through that whole learning curve of firewall setups. So at the end of the day, this is much more easier. This is easier to scale because we don't have to manage Route 53 records. The live.that'sright.com domain just points straight to the NLB on AWS. The edges now auto scale on a schedule based on, they get pre-warmed. The good thing about these quizzes is we know exactly when they're going to happen, so we pre-warm the load balancer with a few instances, and I think our next step is to start building more sophisticated metrics to allow those instances to just start to ramp up behind the scenes as connections start to add up. I think we're still using spot instances too. So a trick that I've often used, I mean, spot instances by design are allowed to terminate unexpectedly, but only if you've been outbid. And as long as I have found to date that there hasn't been a problem with just using the current on-demand price as your spot price, it's never, likely gonna, who's gonna pay more for a spot price than it is just for an unreserved instance price or on demand. At least to date, we haven't had one fail. And I know that, I think Joseph, who is their app dev, who also manages some of the cloud side of things, he will hedge his bets on it. Like, I think he still does a lot of trial and error. Sometimes he'll use spot instances, sometimes he'll go with on demand. I think it depends on if he feels everything else is working okay, maybe he'll start to throw some things in to see how well it holds up. I think that was my last slide. So I know I'm out of time already, so I'm going to open it up to questions. Actually, I should just go back to the title slide so that there's something up on the screen there. But yeah, let's open it up to questions before we go to the final session. We have a question up here in the front. Jan's going to bring you a mic so that it's archived for posterity.
Thank you guys for a wonderful presentation. Very informative. Just basic question. Scaling like this, any ideas on price point per 100 users or 1,000 users?
That's a
or
good
anything?
point. I probably could have dug up an old spreadsheet that I put together, and it, I mean, right now we're not doing any tremendous volume that would qualify for volume discounts on AWS. So it's all pretty much just what you see with their rated. Do you have do you want to disclose what your monthly bills have been?
Sure. I mean,
just from AWS.
Yeah, from AWS it's right at $2,500 a month.
Yeah.
And then Wowzer adds a little bit on there. And as far as how many, currently we have 4 shows a week, 15 minutes each long, but we have a lot of pop quizzes to test new features and all that. So I don't know the exact amount of time that we actually use their servers, but it's been, even at our peak time when we had 12,000 players, we had a show every day. The bill was still under $3,000, so it's not been, it's been surprisingly low. Because when we first started, that's obviously my first question, how much is this going to cost us? So the numbers that were thrown at me were a little scary at first.
Yeah, and well, they were scary because I think we did give you some pretty high projections in terms of numbers, and I'd be curious in my non-billable time to go back and sort of compare some of those things. Well, no, just for my own edification too. But yeah, I mean, usually what I try to do is calculate. If I know the highest bit rate is going to be 800 kilobits per second, I just do some rough numbers based on what I think the throughput's going to be per game, then multiply that times the number of instances that they would be running. The one thing that, what was I going to say? I'm losing my train of thought a couple of times today, and it just happened again. I was going to mention something about the pricing. Well, oh yeah, let's go to more questions. But if you have more on that, please feel free to come up. Yes.
So I think you have like around 10 seconds for every question, right? So do you see the latency of 2 to 3 seconds is an issue?
Oh, is that an issue for the gameplay?
Yeah.
So far, and usually it's below 2 seconds, isn't it? Like I said, this is not an ideal published scenario, right? So for the most part, and we didn't talk about really how, just how subjective the gameplay is admin on their end, right? So they have devices, they're watching it and so there's some, like all the questions are prepared ahead of time, but they are manually queued based on what they're seeing. Like, so they'll have a few representational devices and they'll try and basically queue the states in the app based on what they're seeing in the live gameplay. So that might have been more than one of you may have had that question. So
how do you measure the delay on the client side?
That's a good question. Are you gathering any metrics on the app itself to let you know if there's sort of like how bad the delay can be for people? Like, or have you had any kind of user feedback that have said
we
that.
had some users' feedback if they, in the beginning, we had some issues them opening and closing the app over and over again. So sometimes for one question, when the signal gets refreshed, they had a longer delay than average. So if we played together, his MAU was a split second ahead of time. But that's the biggest we have ever seen. So the delay's it's been great. I mean, it's between 1 and 2 seconds. So we haven't had any issues there. We thought that would be the hardest part based on what we know about live TV, but thanks to Rob, that ended up being the easiest part.
I had this page open during another session, but we were originally testing with Wowza's GoCoder SDK, and we were getting pretty good results with that, but we got better reduced buffering on the player side by using an open source, as you can see, non-English repository for iOS. So this KSY Live iOS, and they have one for Android as well. It's can be you can use it both for playback and publishing. We only needed the playback aspects of it, but it basically has a built-in RTMP library, and it worked really well. Like, we didn't have to do too much tweaking on it. It wasn't hard to use Google Translate for the app dev to sort of get up to speed with it. We had to play around with a few parameters, I think, but it wasn't like a huge footprint in terms of dev time. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much for coming. Feel free to come and ask us questions as you see us for the short remainder of the conference, and enjoy the final keynote.